So we are now live on Facebook. Why don't we start? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Julie, and then also about that beautiful poster behind you as well.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I've followed you for gosh, how many years? At least 4. So it's a total honor to be on your show. I love what you do. You're one of the SEO people that doesn't preach or teach things that go away tomorrow, but rather, lasting principles. And that's rare, especially years ago when I was really getting into it. But yeah. So my name's Julie McCoy. I have several brands by now. The one that I run every day is Express Writers. It's my content agency. And I think that fits in with our topic today because I hire writers and we create content all day long. Web content, blogs, anything written online. That's what we do. And then I also have a personal brand called Content Hacker and just launched my 3rd book. And that's the poster behind me, which I got for the purpose of a book signing here in Austin, not just for my office wall, 10 by 8-foot banner. So Woman Rising, A True Story, that's my new book. And you should have it coming in the mail soon, Ryan, if you don't have it yet.
I'm excited to read it. I had no idea about your personal story, which is incredible, by the way.
Thanks.
I would love if you could share a little bit about, just talk about the book, because that basically is the story, right?
Yes, it is my story, and I'm telling the whole thing. I'm like pinching myself still some days. Did I really do this?
Right.
But, yeah, so in 2012, I escaped my father's cult. I was 21 years old, and that was the only life I'd known growing up in Pennsylvania. I mean, long dresses, when you think of cult, that's what we were. We were that family. So at 21, it was getting really mentally abusive. There was many forms of abuse, but that was what really started to break me, the mental control going on. So I had this baby business on my hands, Express Writers back then. I had just started it and it was my outlet. And I heard this from my counselor just this week. Whenever you're going through trauma like that, you often laser into your creative outlets and it makes you a more creative person. So that was like one side effect of going through that kind of crazy control and abuse was I went full force into my passion, which was writing. I love to write. Stories were my life. It was like my other reality. So I just went full force down that road, started a business, had lots of work. And then I was like, oh, I have a financial route. I can get out. Why don't I get out? So that was a split-second decision. And at 21 years old, I escaped and it was in the middle of the night. So that was 2012. And then 8 years later, here I am. My company has 90 people. It's kind of unreal what's happened since. And that's my book.
It's amazing. And so
Thanks.
you've always been a writer then. I mean, growing up, that was your passion, that was your hobby.
Yes, I was a reader before I was a writer, and I started logging the books because people didn't believe me when I was a kid, but I had read like 600 books by the time I was 16. I was just this voracious reader. It was like food for my soul. So I lived through books. And then I became a writer after I was first a reader.
And so let's talk a little bit more about Express Writers too. So you've been running that since 2012, is that what you said?
Yes, 2011 was actually when I started it. So I had the business idea and I just ran with it, made a profile on Upwork, which back then was called Odesk. So I
Mm-hmm.
made a profile, ran with it, wrote this bio, hired my first 5 writers, and it just kept growing and growing. I didn't think it would last more than a year, but it's lasted 9 years now.
So you started by going out and sourcing writers. Well, so the model wasn't to
Yes.
come to you to write. It was basically people understood that you were a content writing company, basically. Then, correct?
Yes. And at the beginning, my whole advertising model was pretty simple. It was like, well, to me, it was 2 plus 2. I don't know if it would be the same for others, but since I sold content, I was like, why not sell myself through my content skills? Because, oh, I don't have to persuade people, I can write if they come to me through my writing. So that incidentally became content marketing. I didn't know it at the time in 2011, but that's what it was when I was blogging every week, creating content to promote what I did. So that led me straight into content marketing, which total honor. Forbes has named me a thought leader 3 years ago. And it was just something I committed to doing day after day to grow my business.
And I think one of the biggest questions that I get asked, because so us at the agency now, we do content strategy probably makes up for like 30% of our billings, but we don't write content for a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah, we refuse. I learned that lesson the hard way when I first started the
Mhm.
agency. We were writing content, and at the core of what SEO is, it's there's too much back and forth, there's too much room for error, there's too much opinion in content, kind of like design, where it slows
Mm.
down the rest of the campaign. So we just decided to just not write content anymore. We'll pretty much only work with companies that have an internal writer. If not, then we'll refer them to you guys as well. um,
Appreciate
but
that.
but how do you find and hire your writers? You went from 5 to 90 in 6-7 years now. I mean, how do you find them? How do you interview them? How do you assign them? Like the whole process, I guess.
Yes, yes. Well, I've been thinking about this for a couple of days because you invited me on. I think it was Monday or late last week. So I was like, how can I best, give Ryan and his audience this answer? And as I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing, I don't have the secret. I tell you. So it really is like such a trial and error process. And what you just said about the reason you don't do it for your clients makes total sense. And it's why like people come to us and they say, well, do you do web design? Can you publish this for me? And we're like, no, all we do is content creation because it's such heavyweight lifting. Like it is a massive job to create your content just because of what you said. Like there's so much opinion back and forth. Well, this is not how I want my brand positioned. Okay, we have to go back and edit it to get it perfect. So there's a lot of cycles to content that you don't see, I think, until you get into it. And then you're like, oh, this isn't, it's not ready yet to go out into the world. So there's cycles there. But finding writers for us, that's such a process. And it really comes down to a lot of time involved in picking writers. So we go to like every platform in the world. I try new platforms when they come out. We tried to go on ZipRecruiter because they have their tentacles in like 50 other platforms. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I can reach 50 with one, but they don't let you post a remote job. It's like, are you serious? So couldn't use them. That was kind of wild. It has to be employer only, and with benefits. And we do fully remote contract. That's what I've done for 9 years. Like we don't have W-2 employees. It's all 1099 work. And it's worked really well that way. We don't go bankrupt paying healthcare, and our contractors have the freedom to work wherever they want and pretty much whenever they want. So finding them, I use LinkedIn Recruiter, I use Indeed, Glassdoor, Facebook groups. So I have like all these job listings out, and then I'm just cultivating resumes as they come through. And we go through thousands of resumes in a month. And what we do is we give them this writing test that helps us see their actual skills. We've stopped looking at experience. Like it doesn't really matter if you have a degree, if you've been in it for years. What matters is, do you like to write? Like it's the basics that matter whenever we get an amazing writer that writes, content our clients love. So those are the kinds of writers we look for. And that just comes down to time and cultivating out so many people to find the cream of the crop. And it's just tons of time.
Yeah.
I wish there was a secret hack. There is not.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I've had good success grabbing people from Facebook groups. People have actually come to me through the Blueprint. I have some writers, but it's tough, man. I mean, especially for like really advanced B2B content, like the SEO stuff, it's
Yes.
really, really hard to find writers. And, something that I've had to do is really put a lot of work into the strategy, again, the outlines to really extract my knowledge, or videos. I do a lot of videos, and then we'll have people right off the back end. But written content aside from the book that you've been writing for us, is really something I've had to get away from because it's so time consuming in the lack of writers available, or the cost to get it done. Sometimes we'll be paying upwards of like $1,200 to get like a long form blog content written. And
Wow.
it's a lot. So, I mean, how do you manage? You
Yeah.
mentioned that you 1099 everyone. I agree. I mean, just the nature of writers, I would imagine that they're in all over the place, different time zones, different working styles, different timelines to turn stuff around. How do you manage all that? What do you guys use for like project management?
Yeah. So, yeah, I wish we had a perfect solution here too. We don't, but we've kind of hacked this platform called Active Collab. We looked at Basecamp, we looked at a whole bunch of systems, and the problem with a lot of modern day systems for remote teams is they charge per user. And when you have 90 users, that gets like ridiculously expensive, hundreds of dollars per month. So instead of paying something like Basecamp, we found this cloud server, basically what Active Collab is, that has their own platform, and you just pay for a license and then you use it and host it on your server, and it's their platform. So we've kind of hacked Active Collab to be like, we've skinned it, we've made it a team room for our writers, all of the tasks go there, and then we have a content manager overseeing the whole, it's kind of like a house, the whole thing, and then she's looking at deadlines, who's online, and then overseeing the editorial queue. So everything gets pushed into this editorial queue, and we have like 8 part-time editors that they're actually all staggered in different time zones. So we have them all over the world covering different time zones, so content never just sits in the queue. And that used to be such a challenge. Like, it was never the writers that were late, it was content sitting in that queue not getting edited quickly enough, because we do like 200 to 300 projects a month. So we accelerated that by posting remote jobs in different countries to fill in these time zone gaps. So now we have like, one of our editors is in France, one is in the East Coast, one is in South Africa. So they're all in different time zones that work for them, and they're able to log in and edit content and push it through. So that's not really a hack, but this works pretty well for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer to that. Project management
Right.
with that many moving pieces, I can imagine. Like, we've managed writers like between 10 to 15 at a time for different clients, and our PM system pretty much broke down at that point. It was absurd. We do have a question on Facebook Live from Elizabeth. She says, "How do you structure the pay for writers? People write at different speeds, so is it best to do per word or per hour?"
Oh, that's a good question. We do per 500 words. That's kind of our standard. So we just have this fixed price that we offer. And whenever I started back in 2011, we kind of had like well, we started out with 2 levels of writers. So we had general, and then we had expert writers. And then in 2016, I introduced a 3rd tier called authority, as I noticed like the web starting to become this sea of content, and the cream of the crop was where the ROI came from. So the best content you produce is where your biggest ROI comes from. So we restructured, and then the end of 2018, we kind of just did away with general content completely. So we eradicated that lower paying level, and now we're just doing expert and authority content. But yeah, we charge per word, and we pay per word. So it's never hourly.
Got you. Yeah, that's I think that's definitely the move. I think the way that, especially if I would imagine you're probably working most, you can correct me if I'm wrong, working mostly with B2B clients, where the
Yes.
need for content needs to be authoritative. And if you do, I feel like this is one of the models, especially where we're going with AI, which I want to ask you about in a little bit, in terms of like automatic
Mm-hmm.
content writing, where it's the same thing with advertising too, where the field is being leveled by Facebook's algorithm by making it easy to target, making it easy to build audiences. The difference is really the creative, right? It's the actual content that you're putting in front.
Yes.
And it's the same thing with writing. I would imagine from a business point of view, it's not worth it to churn out I don't want to say low quality, but less authoritative content than
Yes.
authority content. From a business point of view, just probably wouldn't make sense when running the numbers.
Yes, 100%. And that's what we're seeing in the requests that come through. We don't have to teach that anymore. There was a point in time where we had to educate clients and say, okay, maybe not the cheapest content, maybe the best, because the cheapest really isn't going to boost your brand at all. But we don't have to do that anymore. People come in saying, do you have the expert niche writer for me? And they want validation. And we do. We go in every vertical and look for writers specifically from like 20 different verticals. So that's like what we do. We look for experts that actually have that niche knowledge. Like, one of our writers is he used to be a patent attorney. So he knows all these weird facts, right? That a writer that doesn't have that industry vertical wouldn't know. So that's pretty important these days.
And in regards to those people, so do you have a database full of people that you pull from, or if a customer comes to you that operates in a vertical that you've maybe never worked in before, do you go out and look for people in that vertical?
We do, yes. And we have about a year ago, I started seeing more of that. Like we have this weird vertical. We didn't have the vertical writer. Probably take me like a year to go find a person that knew that random weird thing. So instead, what we did, we looked for specialists. And that's really been working super well. So for us, a specialist is an expert writer that really knows how to mine Google for research and like get really deep statistics that, oh, it really positions you as an expert to publish that on your blog. So we have these specialists that really know what they're doing with research, and they can kind of transform into almost any expert through their research skills. So
And,
that's one way we kind of fill that gap.
and do you provide them, the writers, any sort of outlines or like internal kind of processes and documentation to kind of push them in the right direction?
Yes, we do. Yes. One big thing I've done throughout the years that's really made us different than a lot of competitors and other agencies. I've created internal training just for our writers. And from that, I actually produced the courses I have that are now public courses. So all that started internally to answer really specific, not problems, but just questions that kept coming up. Like, how do we structure a blog for how do we work on the intro of a blog to get indexed in Google's featured snippets?
Hmm.
So structuring your content is super important, as you already know these things. So those are the things we're teaching our writers.
Nice.
And they come in a lot of times not knowing how to do that, but they know how to write well. They know how to research. So adding that skill really sharpens them, makes them a really amazing writer.
So the writer that sorry, the training courses that you have is for writers, or do you have a training course that's also for agencies for how to kind of build content marketing? Because I know you have a content marketing training too, correct?
Yes, I do. Yes. So I have a content strategy and marketing course, and that's my second book somewhere in my bookshelf. You probably can't see it from the video in my bookshelf. That's my second book that I published in 2018 was Practical Content Strategy and Marketing. So that goes hand in hand with that course, my contentstrategycourse.com. And that course, I teach how to actually build a content strategy for your content marketing. So very meta here, but how to put together a strategy that puts together your content, because without that, you're publishing content in a very, disorderly way that's not going to get tied directly to ROI.
Yeah.
So, and that was a pain point for me. The first 4 years, I didn't have a strategy. And when I implemented it, that's when our income skyrocketed. Like, oh, that content piece directly brought in a prospect. So strategy makes a difference. And then the other course that kind of came from teaching my writers is my SEO writing course. So I teach how to structure and create content that gets found in Google. And that's a really specific skill. Once you learn it, you're unstoppable.
Agreed. And just kind of piggybacking off that, I touched on this before, but there's a lot of content generation AI out there. Like, how do you feel about where I think creative writing, like I would call your book Women Rising maybe more creative writing. I think that type of writing might be safe. This is just my opinion, but really kind of like the more boilerplate business type content that populates a lot of the web, and again, B2B content. Where do you feel like that is going? And just kind of content in general too. I mean, are you worried about AI taking over? Are you excited for it? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, one of my industry heroes, Joe Polizzi, the founder of Content Marketing Institute, he predicted about 5 years ago, I want to say, that by 2020, writers would no longer be creating the majority of online content. So I started studying this 3 years ago because I was like, uh-oh, I run a content writing agency. So whenever I started studying it, and I really went deep, I looked at AI, I tested out tools, I paid for tools. What I found was that in order to get any kind of content created that positioned you as an authority, like really had that voice, and content today that does that, it sounds and reads really human. So the number one thing you don't want to do is sound like a bot, right? Like that's the number one thing to avoid. And that's really hard for AI. We're getting there. We're definitely, there's smart AI out there, but all the AI I was testing, paying for several tools to create content, it all generated at least one sentence that sounded like it was from a bot. And it was usually like right at the very beginning of the content piece or in the first header. And it was just really off-putting. And I just kept thinking as I was researching and generating this AI written content, if I put that on my blog and my readers read that, I don't think they would trust us enough to start chatting with us and then become a prospect because the
Yeah.
content sounded so non-human. And so even in like your blog and your web pages, you still have to have that creative human touch. And I haven't seen an AI yet even come close to that human touch that you really get when you hire a human writer. So all the research I was doing, and I was talking to several leaders in the industry that had bought into like $100,000 AI writing equipment.
Mm.
And they were like, the cost of generating something creative, human, non-bot like is really high. And that's the barrier to entry right now.
Yeah.
Not that it can't be done, although I would like to challenge that. I don't think technology is as smart as they say, because I was testing it. But the cost, the barrier to entry is still like a huge roadblock to get AI that writes content that sounds smart, positions you like an authority. That's super expensive because you have to have this code base, not to go too tech here, but you have to have this code base written for your brand that generates the robot that creates that content.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
wild stuff.
it's an interesting topic for sure. I think I agree. I think the AI that's out there right now is probably good for like an enterprise website, an enterprise e-commerce website that needs product like 200 character product descriptions. You know what I mean? That can
Yeah.
understand, enough about context to write for that. That's a lot more, again, kind of like black and white, just kind of stating the facts of what the product is, blah, blah, blah. I do think that it's still a pretty long way, and a long way meaning probably another 5 years. I think 2020 was a little bit aggressive. I think that another 5 years we'll probably start to see more big publications like HuffPo, for an example, using AI generators to just kind of either like take stories that are breaking on Twitter or something and spin them up quickly to be the first to market. I think it's going to be a while before creative writing starts coming into play. I do think that I think the human element in terms of the opinion is really what matters. If you look at any content that really has the most legs right now, it's content that has a strong opinion that's backed by the right, data.
Yes.
So until you can teach robots, and I think they'll get there eventually, but until you can do that, it's going to be very hard to break. But I think what's going to be really interesting is how Google deals with, like, they are already having a problem with having too much content on the web, just indexation, knowing what to rank and all this stuff. It's already difficult, but let alone when bots are going to be cranking out content, it's going to be very interesting to see how their index handles that.
That's
Very
true.
interesting, actually. And which is good too. I mean, that's why a while ago, I kind of realized that blogging is great, but video is just so much better, and
You can't take away the human face with
no,
a
you
bot.
can't. You can't. I mean, you can try, but you can't for now. So that's why I feel a little bit safe in terms of, my businesses thrive off content, but I pushed to video, and it's also just a lot more scalable and easy to create once you've kind of got like a setup down and you're comfortable talking on camera and whatnot. But so my last question, and I'm sure I'll have some follow-ups here, but it's about, again, these are coming from the Blueprint, some of the agencies that had some questions, is about how to deal with the edits. So I understand you guys, like, how do you set the threshold for edits? And then also, how would you advise an agency who might be working with you to like handle the client who's just a major pain in the ass, just, wants changes to everything, doesn't see eye to eye on what's already been done after they approve an outline? Like, how do you handle that whole situation?
Yes. Well, I would say, first of all, what really helps us there is we set really clear expectations before we even work with anyone. So we take payment up front, like all the little things that, and the agencies might already be doing this. So hopefully I'm not starting too basic, but those little things really set expectations and make it clear that they're on your turf. And that's the first thing you want to establish. Like if they come to you and they want to work with you, you need to let them know that they're now on your turf. This is your playing ground. You're the expert. And you know, especially when I was starting, it was really hard for me to come over to that zone because I was doubting myself. And so you just kind of have to throw that away and stand in your shoes and say, this is my turf, this is my ground. If you want to work with me, here's how it goes. And then just stay firm. So for us, we have all of our agency clients, they click agree to a TOS before they even purchase. They have to click, they agree.
Mm.
And a lot of them don't read it. That's the challenge. So we have to, you know, cite it, screenshot it. Oh, did you read this part where, you know, the revision window is only good for 2 weeks, and then you have to pay if you want a revision past 14 days. So, and that's another thing we do. We gate things by time, and that really helps people move forward quicker. If they know, okay, you only have 14 days to request our 2 free revisions after we write your content, and they move quicker. And that helps the content cycle too, because a lot of clients would otherwise, at the beginning, we had people, when I didn't implement all this, we had people sitting on content orders for like 12 months and forgetting they put their money down with us. I don't know how. So we stopped all that by really implementing some time-based rules. And then the content cycle, whenever we take payment and we say, okay, this is what you need, that's how they come in. They need like 2 blogs, we take payment, and then immediately they're hit with an input form. So we make it really easy for them to tell us what they want. We ask questions, we give them prompts, so they get that input form in their account. And all of that's generated through our e-commerce platform. So we kind of have pre-written forms for over 35 services. So it's customized to each service. If it's a blog, if it's a Facebook ad piece, whatever kind of copy it is, they get a customized input form that gets them going. So we ask them the right questions, so they give us the right answers. And then a lot of times, you know, it's the input they send is it's not grammatically correct. It's like word vomit, and we don't care. That's okay, as long as these questions are answered and we get what we need so we can start writing awesome content. So we don't start writing till that form is filled out, but as soon as it is, like that day, we start writing. And then from there, it's 5 to 6 to 7 days, depending on how long it is. And then from there, it gets edited. And in our editing process, it'll go right back to the writer if we don't see that it's good content. So that way the client, their time isn't wasted by getting bad content. It'll go right back to the writer first. And so by the time they get it, it should be nearly perfect. And then the cycle to ask for revisions, that's cut pretty short, because we try to keep content really, really high quality in our production now. So hopefully that answers that question.
It does. Thank you. And I can vouch for the quality, just for the record. Julie and her team have been helping us with our book. The SEO Blueprint is coming out next month. We actually
That's
just
exciting.
reviewing the final draft today.
Yay!
Really good. I'm really impressed with how it's shaping up. You guys have done a tremendous job taking some of the feedback and implementing it, and I'm really excited for it.
Well, you're a dream client to work with, just for the record.
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. We tried not to do too much. I mean, we just have so much other stuff going on to do that. You know, we didn't really have the time to be that much of a pain, I guess. And no, it's been very helpful, because I wrote I would say probably like 60% of the book, but I was like a year ago going back and reading it, I was like, this is not where I want it to be, and I can't physically get my brain to take it there. So that's when we reached out to you, and you guys have done a really good job with really difficult content to write. I mean, SEO content, especially within the scope of us, who, you know, we consider ourselves a little bit more advanced. Thoroughly happy with the work. And also too, I mean, we're going to start, I would love to, for anyone in the Blueprint who's watching this too, expresswriters.com is definitely the place to go if you guys need content written. I have been pushing it throughout the content trainings, especially not to waste time for an agency writing content, hiring writers. It's not worth the extra $50 to $100 that you're going to make. Let the experts handle it. You focus on strategy, managing the client, and let somebody who's already got this incredibly difficult system down just handle it all for you. Like, writing is definitely something, in my opinion, I think everyone, unless you have somebody in-house who's, you know, knows your style and tone and brand, then it's definitely worth it to go out and contract a company like yourself, you know, to get the right stuff done. It's a mission trying to wrangle writers. So I
It
give you a lot of
is.
credit for what you've done with your company because it's
Thank you. My
uh,
content manager calls herself a cat herder.
yeah,
So
I can definitely see that. We got another question from Facebook. It says, do you see the value of NDAs with clients? Some places charge for this, some clients request this. How do you feel about this approach?
yes, we get that a lot because a lot of times in the input form, they have to disclose like how their software works, some really confidential details. So we get the NDA question all the time, and the only roadblock we get is a lot of times that means we can't use their samples. And if it's like a really tremendous industry where we were doing some amazing work, oh, that's tough. But at the same time, what we look for if we say yes or no to an NDA these days, what I look for is the work that they're going to bring in. And usually, if we sign an NDA, I don't charge a fee for that. It's an interesting idea. Maybe I should. But what I look for is the type of contract coming in. So usually it's like a year long. They need this amount of content. It's going to be this amount of revenue. So it makes sense to sign an NDA and give away that power to show it in our portfolio. So if you have an NDA request come in, I would say look at the volume of work. And if it's a lot of work, I wouldn't charge for it. Just throw that in as a value add. And then they'll be all the more ready to work with you.
Yeah, agreed. It's different. I mean, I sign NDAs all the time, but it's really just to get access to data. And yeah, usually when we sign an NDA, we basically the only thing we're forfeiting is the right to use them as a case study publicly, without expressly written permission to do so. I usually don't have a problem, just for context, Elizabeth, signing an NDA, but it's a much different business line. And actually very few people ask us to sign NDAs. Probably like
Mm-hmm.
5 to 10% of our clients ask us to sign NDAs. It's usually not a problem for us.
Wow. We have like 20, I say 20% these days. It's a lot.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, I can understand why people do.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if we were for like our book, I actually wanted, to put your name on it because, I think you lend value in your words and allowing you to write,
Thanks.
from your own point of view and stuff.
Yeah.
And but I could understand maybe if I didn't want that, if I wanted to be like, if people want, I could give a shit if people know if I wrote the book or not. But if I wanted people to think that like I wrote the book, then I could understand if putting an NDA in front of you. But aside from that, and I can understand why companies or authors would want to do that. I could say as ghostwriting being somewhat frowned upon, but to me, it doesn't make a difference at all.
Yeah.
At all. As long as it's done and done the right way and the product is good, and I think a lot of, with just how busy we are, it's like, and now that I look at like some of the top best-selling authors who are also running companies, I'm like, there's no way they wrote this book, like there's no way that they wrote the book. There's absolutely no way.
I wrote this book, every word, but
You did
it was hard.
You are a writer, in all fairness. I can write, but I'm not a
That's
writer.
true.
There's a difference. I don't enjoy writing.
True.
It's been a necessity for the business for a long time. And now, going through and editing this book, this is the most writing I've done in years now. And
Wow.
it's so very tedious, but it's going to take me like a week to get through this. It's very tedious.
See, I love it. It's like how it's my creative outlet. I'm like, yes,
Yeah,
writing
good for you.
time.
And you're able to make money off it too, which is amazing.
Yes.
I
Yes.
make money
I'm
off
thankful
SEO,
for
but
that.
I really don't enjoy doing SEO at all. Actually, I despise it. But anyways, any more questions on Facebook for Julia while we have her? Anything else you want to talk about, Julia? Anything on your mind?
Oh, you got some really good questions. I think, back to hiring writers, like how difficult that is. One question I've gotten from company owners, entrepreneurs, is like the qualification process. And our writing test used to be pretty simple, but these days it's really evolved. We have our writers like read our guidelines, our candidates. We have them read our guidelines up front. And our guidelines like teach a lot of things, like how to write subheaders, how to format your content. So they have to, it's a two-part process, read those guidelines and then write a sample that follows a example client order. So those two things they have to meet. Knowing, we'll know right away if they read our guidelines. Like if there's a subheader that's not formatted, oh, didn't read our guidelines. So that's one immediate qualification that's really helped us. So tons of documentation and really early on helps us find really good writers.
Mm.
And then it just comes down to the test. Both my content manager and I, we both look at it to get a second opinion at the writing style. And a lot of times you can find writers by looking for people that just love to write but don't have experience. Some of those, gosh, they've been with us for 4 or 5 years and they're our top writers today. And I pulled them like off Odesk back in the day. They were charging like $2 a page, and they're some of our best writers, and we just coached them throughout the years. So, don't be afraid to hire writers with little experience, but be ready to train them and put in a lot of work. So that's time. That's a lot of time. Like, I spend tons of time with our writers, coaching them, working with them. And that's fun for me. It's a really enjoyable process, but definitely it's a commitment. It's a commitment to hire someone that doesn't have experience, but in the end, you might get someone better than going for that super experienced, super expensive writer and then just settling with whatever they produce. But if you
Yeah.
get a writer you can coach, it's awesome what can
Yeah,
happen.
I think it's very common. I think pretty much with anything you hire, no matter what your business line is, if you have the internal training and systems and processes, then I always tell people to hire less experienced people who, I say, like, have that twinkle in their eye, right? Like, people who
Yes,
get shit done. They want to be
that's
there.
good.
They're hungry to learn. But if you don't have that, then you don't have a choice than to hire somebody more experienced. And then you also have to go through the training process to get them to bend to what your company needs to get done, to your client needs to get done. So that's honestly a huge reason why processes, systems, trainings are so important, especially if you want to be able to run
Yes,
remote like you are and keep your costs down and 1099 people and, kind of, as you said, safeguard your business by doing that, and be more profitable and work from home and have time to spend with your kids and all that stuff. So
yes,
um it's systems and processes are incredibly important. They're a pain in the ass to get done, but once you have them done, like, that's where you really hit that scale and get to the next level, and can really
true.
start to pull yourself out of the weeds of having to do everything every single day.
Well, it's like the whole work hard versus work smart thing.
Yeah.
It's really is two separate things. You can work really hard, maybe get somewhere, or you can work really hard and really smart. That's what I like to do these days, work hard and smart, because I still work long hours. I write too much.
I do too. Yeah,
So,
I do too. A question just came in from Charles. He said, I found there's a huge turnover with writers. How do you deal with that?
oh boy, I don't have a cure. We deal with that every month. There's turnover. I mean, I think my content manager says now, and we have a great team in our core team. That's been such a huge lifesaver for me, is just knowing that I have people that share the same values leading our writers. So we don't tolerate crap, like, to put it really, really simply. If writers don't produce content on our deadlines, if it's like 1 or 2 times that they've been late, then how can we continue to trust them with our client accounts? So there's turnover, and we're that agency that's not afraid to say, okay, you're not a part of the team anymore because you're not upholding the rest of our values. If the rest of the team is working together this well, that 1 week link, you shouldn't tolerate that. That's just my perspective. So yeah, there's turnover, and that's, as long as we live in the world.
Yeah.
I don't see that changing.
No, 100% agree. I mean, it's one of the pitfalls of being digital or remote. It's a huge pitfall of using 1099s, but I think a couple things. I think number one is that you just have to build it in as it's part of doing business costs, like, people are going to flake.
Yes.
It is what it is. You just kind of have to wrap your head around that fact and just deal with it. But also, if you are giving people consistent work, and you can still build a culture in a team remote, we're actually here in
Oh
Miami,
yeah.
and we have a handful of people here, but we're still all remote because we're just happier that way,
Yes.
but we're still a team, what I mean? Like, there's still ways that you can make people feel involved. And I think that's the big thing, is that it's easier for them to ghost on you if they feel like there's no accountability for them to be there. Then yeah, it's easy for them to do that. And it's really hard if you're only managing 1 or 2 writers. Again, that's why I said, it's just like you focused heavily on saying, we're not going to do design, we're not going to do SEO. Like, we write content. That's what we do.
Hmm.
You know, if you're tripling down on what your core competency is, and it's a lot easier to then get your team around you to buy in and get the right people there. So there's ways around it, Charles. Charles also said he's used your service in the past, and will continue to use it. So kudos to you and your team. You guys are great.
Oh, thank you, Charles.
Yeah. Any more questions from Facebook before I let Julia go? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Well, why don't you give your final plug, Julia, while we see if any other questions come in. Tell us where we
Oh
can
boy.
find you, where we can hire to work with you, and definitely where we can find your new book.
Oh, you made it simple. You told me what to say. I'm like, I don't speak, I write. So when anyone's like, okay, Julia, where's your pitch? I'm like, let me write it first. So yes, where can you find me? So expresswriters.com, as we've already talked about, that's my agency. That's where I also blog the most regularly. So Express Writers Write blog. We publish one long form content piece a week. That's how we've pulled in 100% of our audience. We have 100,000 people on our site now every day. And I've always gone at it from that SEO perspective. And that's why you and I are paths crossed, because I learned so much from watching your YouTube videos back in the day of how to do SEO well. I think there's a keynote on your channel. Anyone watching, if you haven't seen it, should go watch. It was a really good keynote you gave. I don't know if you're a speaker by trade or an introvert. It was really good.
I
One of
appreciate
the
that.
best.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not a
Yeah.
speaker by trade. No, it's a skill that I developed because I didn't have my
That's
when you're back
awesome.
against the
I love
wall, you
hearing
know. Yeah.
it. That's awesome. Yeah. So I've started YouTubing too the past 2 years. So I haven't been doing it much. So my channel, Julia E. McCoy, that's my Twitter handle. And then Content Hacker is my other brand my personal brand that I launched 2 years ago. And my book's out. So you can find it on Amazon, Woman Rising. And I think that covers it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Julie. Again, guys, anyone watching this, especially Blueprint members, you know, I fully stamp my approval on Express Writers and Julia.
Thanks.
If you guys need content written, you know, look no further. Prices are solid, you know, and the quality is definitely better than what it's priced to be as well. So,
Oh, thank you. Maybe I'll go raise my rates now.
yeah, you should. Thank you for joining us, and of course, good luck with your book. And we'll obviously be in touch very soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ryan.
Bye, Julia.
Bye.